Hi guys, and welcome to the Alchemy of Self-Love with Success 4. This is episode 2 in our series with Suzanne Eder. So hello Susan, how are you?
Hello, Richard. I'm well. How are you?
I'm really good, thank you. Yeah, it's been a busy day here, so it's great to get all this stuff created. And in our first podcast, it was fantastic. We got into depth into what self-love is and what that means to people in the definition. Do you want to explain to the audience a little bit about yourself and a little bit about the first episode?
Yeah, thank you. I'd love to. So we were talking about the importance of self-love in general, certainly, but also as a foundational aspect of any self-development process that people are undergoing. And my definition of self-love is recognizing, honoring, and celebrating the deepest truth of who we really are. So, and the reason that I have come to feel so strongly about this is that I have been a transformational life coach, a teacher, a healer for many years, and working with clients, it became obvious to me that when someone comes to me to initiate some kind of positive change in their lives, they tend to be focused on what actions they should take, what steps they should take. And often what they're not aware of is that underlying their motivation is this belief, and you and I have talked about this a lot, this belief there's something wrong with them that they have to fix.
Yeah.
And when that's the underlying belief structure, then they can take all the actions, they can take the steps and feel good about taking the steps, but they're not going to necessarily experience that deep sense of fulfillment that they're looking for. Because fulfillment really is a feeling, it's a felt sense, and it arises from love. So in my work, I like to turn things around and start with, let's cultivate self-love and initiate our positive changes from the standpoint of, I'm already worthy and whole, and I just want to grow in a new direction. So when we start from a place of wholeness and self-love, then our actions are more fulfilling, our experiences more fulfilling, and we get to know ourselves at a deeper and deeper level.
So it's almost like it's your, instead of trying to fix something and bring something towards yourself to change your behavior, you're taking something out within yourself and expressing it.
Exactly. That really is the essence of it. When we think about, often we think about self-development in terms of a goal that's out there that we have to reach. And what you just said is exactly what I see is a more powerful way to look at it. It's really learning what's within us, all of our talents and skills and passions that want to be expressed. So yes, it's an inside out journey.
Yeah.
That's why self-love is so essential to that journey.
I see a lot of that, and I totally get that and agree with that, is that a lot of illnesses are to do with not allowing things to go and letting things out as opposed to letting things in.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's the sort of process that we're going. So guys, when I've just briefly, the reason why me and Suzanne connected was because of her talk, a TED talk, which is The Dark Side of Self-Improvement. And if you haven't seen it, go to YouTube and find it, or Susan's website. It's an incredible, it is a very, very good TED Talks, and there's a lot out there, but this one really, really captured me because it was about you not being fixed, and that's why we connected. So today we're going to talk about, in the first podcast, if you haven't listened to it, go back, it's on YouTube and on our SoundCloud and iTunes, and that The Alchemy of Self-Love, episode 1, and that's to do with what self-love means and the definitions. But this one's going to be more about cultivating self-love from with you. So Suzanne, if I hand over to you, and if you talk about how you can cultivate self-love.
Yeah, that's we're going to have a couple of podcasts on this, because this really is, obviously there is not one singular way to do it. And a lot of this is about people experimenting and exploring with what works for them. But I like to start with how I often introduce people to the idea about how they might go about it is to think in terms of having a better relationship with ourselves. And so if you think in terms of relationship and the qualities of what we would consider a really good relationship, those are qualities like respect and trust and those kinds of things. So what I'd like to do, Richard, is if that's okay, is just to walk through a brief exercise that I often do in my classes, or in a private session with clients. It's very simple, and what it is I'm going to speak about 10 statements very slowly, and they all have to do with these qualities of a good relationship. So I'll say things like, I respect myself. So I'm going to speak in the first person. So as you listen, as those that, who are listening, imagine that you're thinking this, I respect myself. And so what I want you to do is just see how it feels. Like, is that true? Do I respect, like, it's kind of get a felt sense of it. Does this feel good to me? Does this feel true for me? Does this feel foreign to me? Does this feel even, offensive in some way to me? So I just want everyone to notice their reactions to these phrases. This is the first part of it. So just notice your reaction. So here we go. I'm just going to speak all of them, one after the other, but very slowly. So the first one is, I respect myself. Just notice how that feels to take that in. I trust myself. I appreciate myself. Again, just noticing how you feel. I have compassion for myself. I listen deeply to myself. I honor myself. I am kind to myself. I cherish myself. I support myself. I am honest with myself. So those are the statements that I offer to get people started. Richard, did you happen to notice if you had any particular reaction to any of them?
Yeah, I did. Straight away, I started to feel a lot calmer, and the level of I have a quite high level of anxiety. Bear with me. I won't drink tea while I'm on the telly. But so for me, straight away, I felt that almost emptying of the anxiety, which is the way it kind of feels. And also there was with the first couple of statements, I kind of get them and I'm all right with them. But there was one about you didn't say it's not beating yourself up, but it said it was I am not kind to myself. I think it was like the fourth one along.
I am kind to myself. I have compassion for myself.
That's it, the compassion one. The word compassion is something I think for yourself is something that I struggle with, and not beating yourself up about things. So I noticed something there. It was hard to swallow.
Yeah. No, thank you for sharing that. So that's exactly what I want people to get curious about as they listen to those phrases, is to see which are the ones that feel a little, that they're aware that either they don't do that. That's not the kind of relationship they have consistently with themselves. And so the next part of this, which we're not going to do in this conversation, but for those who are listening, if you feel called, a really great way to follow this up is when you identify one or two of these aspects that feel a little either foreign to you, or you're aware that you're not really treating yourself that way, is to do some journaling. I'm a big fan of journaling as a practice, as a technique for getting to know ourselves more deeply and to appreciate ourselves. So what I suggest is to do two, what I call free write. And a free write is where you simply put your pen to paper or your fingers to the keyboard, and you just start writing without stopping and without censoring and without editing, and just keep the pen moving or keep your fingers moving for about 15 minutes. And the first question that you want to respond to is, how have I not blank? How have I not respected myself? How have I not shown compassion for myself? So just kind of get curious, how have I not done that? And then the second question is, now how could I be more blank, be more respectful of myself? How could I listen to myself more deeply? How could I be more compassionate? So it's, and if you open those questions up with a how might I, not how should I, right? We don't want to turn this into yet another opportunity to beat ourselves up. But, when you ask a question in that open, curious way, how might I be more compassionate with myself? And literally just keep writing until new ideas flow. You'd be surprised at what shows up. I've done this simple exercise many times in groups, and people always get something really valuable from it.
Yeah, I can see straight away that the way you're explaining it about the language you're using is very unjudgmental of yourself.
Yes, and that's part of what it takes to cultivate self-love, and not to become the thought or the language police, but to be willing to change how we speak to and about ourselves in a way that's kind, kind, supportive, empowering, all those things. So, one of those small turns of phrase that I do use is I'm sure you've heard this before from many other people, but the word should is almost always comes from a place of self-judgment. So if you start shifting the word should and say, how could I, or how might I, it softens it, and it starts to convey internally a sense of, again, there's nothing wrong with me. I just have choices that I could make.
I like
So
the word shall. How shall I? That almost
yeah,
like creative, isn't it? Storytelling. Like,
yes.
how shall I do this better? How shall I?
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, how shall I? Yeah, that's more powerful. That's more like, yeah, I'm going to do this. Yeah, I like that one. I like that a lot.
As it really does, because we're conditioned to judge everything that we do. Simply, I mean, there's times today where I've made spelling mistakes on the banners behind, and I look back and you think, oh, why you just do that properly? You do everything else well, and you miss the little bits. And you're conditioned to focus on the things that you do wrong, supposedly wrong, as opposed to actually giving yourself credit for the things that you are doing well.
Exactly. And I know this probably isn't a new concept. However, I'm not sure people really often appreciate how deeply that conditioning affects us. We really are. Most of us have been conditioned to look for flaws, to look for what's wrong. And that's our kind of our go-to. That's, as soon as we do, as you said, make a, may not even be a mistake, but if something we think is a mistake, often our immediate response is to beat ourselves up in some way. And that, doing that day in and day out, moment in, moment out over time really does have a very depleting, diminishing effect on our sense of who we are and what we can create. So,
Yes, yeah, it does. And again, it comes back to your your mission is to stop people feeling as if they need fixing and there's something wrong with them. So that's also a theme that's running through all of your work. Is that fair to say?
It absolutely is fair to say. Yes. Yes. Yeah.
And when did you, like, going off a little bit off topic here, but when did you start to need to put these principles? When did you notice that I need to start being kinder to myself? Because it must have been like we all do in the self-development world, coaching world, and in the world, everything we create is just almost speaking to ourselves. So when did you feel like I need to be kinder to myself, and what sort of brought that about?
That's a great question, Richard. It took me a little while, I'll be honest. What stimulated it was my shift from the corporate world into self-employment. So I knew what it was like to be an employee of a large corporation and to receive a paycheck. I didn't know what it was like to be out there on my own, growing my own work in the world by myself, in effect, because that's how it felt. So I was really, really hard on myself. I expected that I would hit the ground running and my business would take off, and that didn't really happen, I will say. And I distinctly remember one year, I don't remember which year it was, but I'd been in business for a couple of years, and I was frustrated with myself that it wasn't growing as quickly as I wanted it to grow. And it was around New Year's, and I was rereading my journal entries from the previous year just as a review. And I was just struck by how hard I was on myself and how kind of mean I was to myself. I could see it in writing. I was shocked. I hadn't been as aware as I needed to have been that, wow, my self-talk is just, how could anyone possibly succeed if they're talking to themselves like this? So that was my aha moment, is just literally seeing it in writing, how harsh I was on myself. So then I became really committed to turning that around.
So where did that come from, though? There must have been a build-up of that over. I mean, were you always critical of yourself? Were maybe your parents critical, or family members? Was it something that built up over time?
My own sense of its origins in this lifetime are just that I was, in my family, straight A's were rewarded. Okay, good grades were rewarded. So I learned early on that in order to get the kind of what I thought was love, but really was approval that I wanted. I needed to get straight A's. So it was, and I was afraid there was fear of not getting straight A's. So that's happens when we're starting from a place of, oh, I'm not good enough. I need someone else's approval so I can feel better about myself. So when I was striving for this approval and terribly afraid of what might happen if I didn't get it. So I was sort of this inner thing about not making a mistake became just embedded in my psyche,
Yeah, I can see that. Look, when I get the emails that we send back and forth, you put an incredible amount of time into research and doing things in a way that's very like you put a lot of time and work and effort into what you do, and I can tell that from your emails and your research and your preparation. I think that's the word I'm looking for. So I can see that from you. It's sort of ingrained in you to do things very, very, because like some of the podcasts I do, some people, we just turn it on and we go. And it's great to work with someone who does a lot of research and a lot of thought into what you do. Do you think that's part of your want to still be kind of like make sure everything's okay and right?
I'm sure there's still a trace of that in there. But that particular quality is often one that's associated with introverts, which I am. Introverts are much more likely to want to do a lot of preparation ahead of time, as opposed to just talking off the top of their head. That's just a classic introvert trait. And it's just, how it feels to me is I care about my work and I care about how I convey it. And so that's I think the primary motivation. But there, like with most people, I'm sure I have a mix. Many things that we do, they come from kind of a mix of a very loving, positive, supportive place, and there's often some fear still laced in there. So there may still be some of that in there for sure.
I really like that. I like what you just said there, was that it's a trait of an introvert, because I'm quite introverted, really, in the grand scheme of things. And I'm in a self-development world where a lot of people aren't introverted or portraying that they're not. And I really like that I think that's important for someone to listen to who's introverted, because to know that their preparation is part of what makes part of what makes an introvert great is that they're very specific and they're very detailed and they're very fine-tuned. And I personally find that really, really a great quality in someone, that they can specifically get down to something and care about something so much.
Absolutely. There was a time when I considered having my work be focused on helping introverts, because having grown up as one in a primarily extroverted culture, it's really easy to think there's something wrong with me. I'm surrounded by people who love to be around other people, and they're highly active, and they're very spontaneous. Like, wow, there must be something wrong. That was a big source of my feeling there was something wrong with me, that I was introverted in an extroverted world. So there was a time where I was almost going to focus my work in that direction. I realized it was a little bit too narrow, and that a lot of these things that I help people with have nothing to do with introversion or extroversion. But I do have a soft spot in my heart for introverts, because I think it's easy to look at our traits and think there's something wrong with us, when it's just the way we are. It's the way we process information. It's just it's an element of our talent and skill. We're deep. We reflect inwardly, and we go deep.
And that's why I kind of brought that up there, was because I want people, I connect very much with introverts and more shy, but I'm the one who goes to the person in the corner of the room at the party, stand on their own. And I connect with that. And I wanted people maybe to hear this, that are trying to cultivate self-love, to know that if you are an introvert, being very detailed about things is something that you can really, really, is a bit of a gift, I believe.
It is a gift. It is a gift. And of course, like any gift, we can overuse it, or we can use it in service of our fear rather than in service of our love, right? So any gift can be, just as you were pointing out, it could be that I'm still wanting to be very thorough out of some fear that if I don't, I'll make a mistake. So the same gift can be, again, in service of love or fear. But I think it's so important to recognize that it really is a gift. It's a talent, it's a skill, it's something that we're good at and that is helpful,
So anyone who's listening to this and they want to learn how to sort of be kinder to the self, cultivate self-love, do you have any other sort of advice that we haven't gone over? I know we're going to go more depth to this and specifics like meditation and recognizing your inner guidance, but is there anything kind of that where a place to start?
A place. Well, that's why I did that one exercise. I think that's a great place to start. Is to start to look at the nuances of how we're treating ourselves. You know, because the reason I developed that particular exercise was the word love means so many things to so many people, and it can seem kind of too general and maybe too big. Like, well, how do I love myself? And that's why I thought, well, what are the elements? What are the aspects of a loving relationship? And there are things like respect and trust and listening. So that's why I like to start there, because it's easier for people to think in terms of, well, boy, do I listen to myself? Do I really trust myself? Like it helps them to start thinking about their relationship with themselves in a new way. So that's why I like to start. If it's a totally new, idea for someone, it's just, let's just start with, rather than this big thing called love, let's take a look at some of the different aspects of it and see where you might get the most benefit from cultivating certain aspects. So I like to start there. I also like to really emphasize, as you and I have been doing in this conversation, the importance of our self-talk. So I always, invite people to imagine they can literally tune up the dial of their own self-awareness and just start paying more attention to the kinds of habitual thoughts that show up. Like, here's an example. For years, Richard, whenever I made a mistake, the first thought that was in my head was, you idiot. Like it literally, like that was the first, you idiot. It just was an automatic thing. Oh, you idiot. And I've since learned, by the way, that a lot of people have that same,
Yeah.
that same kind of, they use the same word even. So I ask people just to become, even though they think they already know, typically they aren't yet aware. Just like I wasn't aware until I saw it in my journal. There's an expanded awareness that can occur. But, oh my gosh, I really am treating myself terribly. Now, it's become so normal, just a part of our inner landscape, that we don't notice it. So that's the next step, is just to notice it, to intend to notice it. I don't know if I talked about this in one of our earlier conversations, but I refer to the 4 portals of transformation as intention, awareness, willingness, and practice. And so they're all related. It isn't linear, but so in this example that we're talking about, we want to intend to become more aware of how we are literally thinking and speaking to and about ourselves, and then become willing to practice a new way of thinking. So in the example I just gave you about the idiot, well, that was simple. I just had to stop it. I just had to, okay, here's my practice. Whenever I start to say I'm an idiot, I'm gonna say no to that. Keep my heart open, but just say no, I'm not an idiot. So just like literally, like it's a practice, like literally practice when these triggers occur, pausing, taking a deep breath, and making a shift in focus.
I really like that term, practice. I've not heard that linked before. The practice of talking to ourselves differently. The practice is really important, is because you do slip back, and it's like anything, trying a new thing, but the practice of talking to ourselves. And I think that could become a self-development tool in itself. The practice of this, the practice of that. You have to kind of do it over and over again, and you have to force yourself originally to do it, because you've been so conditioned, obviously, backwards, doing it the other way. But the practice of self-love, I think, is an important thing to talk about.
It is. And by the way, we don't have to force ourselves. I am never an advocate of force, but I know what you mean. We have to be determined. We have to be determined and willing. I always say willingness is a far more elegant path than willpower. We could bully ourselves. I'm gonna be nice to myself, God darn it. But it's much better, much more effective to be willing to practice. And that now the practice itself brings that element of discipline in effect, right? I'm going to bring some commitment to this because it takes that. That's what it requires. As you said, we've had how many years or decades of thinking a certain way. And so in order to shift that, we need to keep practicing until it becomes ingrained and it becomes our go-to, way of thinking. Yeah, but it is a practice.
It is. And I think this series could really be like the jump off point we're hoping for I'm hoping for that the people will start to practice things and listen to this over and again, revisit Suzanne's page and her website, and revisit these podcasts, because it would be a fun, but you've got to kind of listen over and over again. You'll catch up on different bits, but it's a reminder.
It is a reminder. It is a reminder. And carrying that idea of practice to another technique, which is one that I use often, it's a technique of using what I call anchor statements. So if you think about we're talking about the process of shifting from one way of thinking, which is judgmental and unkind, to a new way of thinking, which is loving and kind. And we're talking about how to practice that shift. So step one, right, is to be aware that I've just done the thing I don't want to do anymore. I just said something like, you idiot, So that's step one. Step two is always to take a deep breath. And I'll come back to why that's important, but it's always just take a deep breath, create some space between what you just did and what you want to do. So create some space. And then it's really helpful to have what I call anchor statements, a few anchor statements that you can then focus on, anchor into, that something that is kind and loving. And there's a real art to creating anchor statements that are effective. So how are we doing on time, Richard? I don't want to...
About a few more minutes left in this one. So yeah, keep going, because I would like to get this in at the end. I think it's important.
Okay, great. So an anchor statement it can be anything from, I'm okay. It could be something just really basic. It's just I'm okay, to something more specific to an attribute you're trying to develop. It's what it really is a reminder of a deeper truth. It's a reminder of a deeper truth of who we are. And so it has to be something that we already know somewhere in our heart of hearts is true, or it has to be something that we're willing to believe is true. So, for example, if you have a similar, like, oh, you idiot kind of a thing, and you say, no, again, step one, I notice I just said that. Step two, I pause. Step three, my anchor statement might be, no, I'm learning here how to love myself. Like, that could be an anchor statement. I'm learning now how to love myself. And the importance of the anchor statement is, if we don't anchor our focus into something that's pointing in the direction we want to go, it's easy to keep reverting back to the old way. So the selection, the generation of anchor statements is something that's really helpful and important. And in fact, it's probably is worth going into more deeply in our next podcast. But the concept is you're anchoring in to the deeper, what I call the deeper truth of who you are. Because if you get that you're already worthy and whole, that's what you're anchoring into.
That's great. So this podcast has been fantastic, because you've given people a place to start off with and a few tools to get themselves started. So anchoring and doing the exercise that you did at the start is a very good grounding for the very essence of finding and cultivating self-love. So guys, if you could take anything, or if you want the audience to take away, or the listener to take away anything from this podcast, what would it be?
It would be that self-love can be learned. It isn't just a concept that's nice to think about. It literally can be cultivated and embraced through practice. So I want people to get that it's doable. This really is doable.
Fantastic. So Susan, how can people find your work outside of this podcast?
They can visit my website, which is SuzanneEder.com, SuzanneEder, all one word.com, or check out my TED Talk on YouTube, The Dark Side of Self-Improvement.
It's a great TED Talk. So guys, and also go back and listen to episode 1 of this and keep repeating them, and check out episode 3. Eventually these will be in a playlist on YouTube and SoundCloud and iTunes. So you'll be able to listen to all 4 of these podcasts. So stay tuned for episode 3. We'll be going deeper into how to cultivate self-love. Go back and listen to episode 1, which is what is self-love, and we go through the explanations and the terminology and what it might mean to you, and check out Suzanne's work on her website, SuzanneEder.com, and we'll speak to you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks.